Hey guys, and welcome to the Real Estate Doctors Podcast, where I'm here to inspire, educate, and sometimes entertain you. My guest today, Will De Jesus, is sometimes quite entertaining. He is a buddy of mine that I met a couple, 2 or 3 years, maybe 3 years ago, on a Men of Means, which is my mastermind, on a trip. First time I met you, we were in Puerto Rico, I believe, and Will had all this. Will's a CPA. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but he had all this crazy knowledge about an asset class I knew nothing about. So today he's been nice enough to come on the podcast, and we're going to talk because it is tax time and tax stuff is always relevant. I know that's boring. We're going to talk a little bit about some really good tax stuff you should know if you're a real estate investor. We're going to talk about the tech and the startup world as an asset. And we're just going to go and see what, he's got crazy knowledge. I do also want to talk about Will is in Colombia right now. I literally, right before we did this, saw a post on social. I live in Aruba. We're both American, about living in different places and how beneficial it can be. So I think we should talk about that too. But I just popped that up here. So Will, if you want to, introduce yourself to my followers here, please do.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay. I appreciate you having me on your podcast. Shout out to the doctor. Shout out to Ngozi. Shout out to taxterminal.com. All right. So I am Guillermo Will De Jesus. Everybody calls me Will. I am a certified public accountant, certified internal auditor, and certified information systems auditor turn tech entrepreneur, founder as well. So I started my career years ago, 15 years ago, in the tax and accounting space, became a CPA, and then I ended up creating my own platform, Jay, which is called taxterminal.com, where people can actually go there and get their taxes done by a CPA without them having to do it themselves on TurboTax. Inadvertently, I learned that I was actually a tech guy, that I was actually in tech. I didn't know that I was in tech. I was actually just designing something for myself and for my clients. But it ended up being that I was in tech. I knew nothing about it. This is going back 8, 9 years. I didn't know how to get capital. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, to be honest with you. But I did know what I needed to build, right? I didn't know that it was an asset class in and of itself. So my journey has been really understanding how to build tech, what the tech needs of people are, and really understanding it as an asset class, which is a little bit about what I'd like to enlighten your audience on now that, real estate is not the only asset class out there. Crypto's out there, right? Publicly traded companies are out there, and startups, especially tech startups, they're out there as well.
Yeah, I mean, you have such a great, interesting background. I didn't know that's how you ended up getting into it. So let's talk a little bit. Let's get the boring but very practical stuff out of the way, and I promise we won't talk for hours about it. So I want to talk about a few subjects that I think are important to everybody, which is I'm just going to go off. Let's start with Section 179 expense. Can you explain what that is and how that could be helpful to a business owner or to a real estate entrepreneur? Oh, we can't hear you, buddy. You're on mute.
Section 179, I think a lot of you real estate guys and real estate gals know about it. Maybe for some of the beginners, no, it's obviously a way to be able to accelerate your depreciation, to be able to take that deduction, to be able to create a little bit more cash flow for your real estate operation, right? Last year, the accelerated Section 179, which is the portion that allows for you to accelerate depreciation, which gives you more benefits, and was 1,160,000. This year it went up to 1,220,000. Right, so it went up, which benefits us. Right, gives you a little bit more cash flow.
I want to jump in here. When I was a CPA, I don't practice anymore, but 25 years ago, I swear the limit was like $10,000. So it's like completely insane that it went from 10,000 all the way to 1,000,000. And, for those people, there are going to be people here that don't know what Section 179. And I always like to give like practical examples. So like, can you give me like a practical example of like how I can benefit from that and a common asset that you could write off? Yeah, do that.
Absolutely. I love it. Let's talk about houses, right? We're all in real estate. Even though I'm in tech, I'm in real estate, right? I have to be in real estate. It's an amazing asset class, right? I am diversified, right? I work. I started as a W-2. I'm an employee. It's beneficial to have property when you're an employee. So I dabbled in that asset class. Then I started to learn asset classes per se. So 179 is going to allow for you to accelerate the amount of depreciation that you have on a home, or if you do what they call a cost segregation study on an appliance or an equipment piece of that home. What does that mean? Normally speaking, you're going to take a certain amount of depreciation that is not accelerated. You're going to take the property, you're going to divide it by 37 and a half, 27 and a half, however you're going to do it, and you're going to be able to take that depreciation. But accelerated depreciation 179 allows you to take. So if it allows you to take more, that means that that's a higher deduction. That means that your base of profit on that activity is going to be less. If your taxable income is less because your depreciation is higher by using 179, you're going to pay less taxes.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
Now, with a lot of, go ahead.
So a common thing that people do in business and sometimes with the real estate is they get like a truck or something that's over, I think it needs to be 6,000 pounds if that's a still number. So they didn't even like, let's say you bought $100,000 truck and you didn't even write a check for $100,000. You put 5,000 down and finance 95,000. Give just a practical example. And then if people want more information, we'll have all your information down in the links and everything, but give me a practical example, like on $100,000 truck that I just borrowed money, I only put 5,000 down. How much of a deduction, like let's say a business, because I know it'd be easier for a business, can I deduct with that?
I love it. That's a great question. So first of all, to be able to write off your car, it has to be over 6,000 pounds. Bam. You have to use it 50% or more. Let's use the example where you're using it 100% of the time.
Yep.
You buy a $100,000 truck.
Yep.
If you have profit of $100,000, your profit becomes zero.
It's insane. It's insane.
Okay, but wait, here's the trick. Remember, the IRS doesn't do things from the goodness of their hearts.
Yeah.
The basis of your truck is now going to be zero. Which means when you sell that truck, you're going to have to pay taxes on every dollar that you get when you sell it. So you should probably not Section 179 things that you're thinking about selling. You want to Section 179 things when you have profit. That's number one, because it only allows you to take it when you have profit. You don't have profit, you can't. 179 is not going to help you. It doesn't give you losses, guys. It doesn't give you losses. It only digs into profit, right? So you got to make sure you have profit, and then you have to make sure that you're not really thinking about selling it anytime soon, because when you sell it, they're going to recapture that, because now the basis on paper of your truck is going to be zero. And if you sell it for 50 G's, you're going to get hit with tax.
You're going to have to pay tax on 50,000.
That's right.
Yeah.
Correct.
So, I mean, that's a good disclaimer. I still, I have to say it's just a badass move. I mean, you have 100,000 in profit and you tell me, imagine as a business owner, you have 100,000 in profit and you tell me like, go buy $100,000 truck, which you might want to buy anyway, and just go finance it. And guess what? You won't have to pay tax on any of the 100,000 profit you made. That's killer for me. So, I think that's enough for Section 179 because I want to talk about a bunch of stuff with you. You did mention cost segregation, which is kind of like a depreciation thing. If you could briefly explain it, but here's my question to you. Like with the cost segregation, is there like a separate study you got to do or something extra you need to pay?
Yes, good question. They're not cheap, right? These things are not cheap. So cost segregation studies are built for people that have a lot of buy and hold real estate. Right? They have, a lot of, they just bought a 10 unit, 20 unit, 30 unit, and they want to go ahead and see if they can maximize their cash flow and maximize their deductions. Okay. This is not something for the fix and flip game, right? Obviously, because again, remember, it's going to bring the basis of your property all the way down. So when you sell it, you're going to have to recapture. But it does help when you're thinking about keeping things and you want to accelerate the depreciation. And it's the same thing essentially. You're going to be able to take a higher deduction. Therefore, you're going to have a lower profit on paper. Therefore, you're paying less taxes. Therefore, you're increasing your cash flow. But the cost segregation study can cost you upwards of $5,000.
Okay.
It could be even more. They're basically registering every piece of material, every piece of equipment in that property that you bought, and they're creating a separate asset registry on it, and they're accelerating the depreciation as much as they can on that piece of equipment. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of
Right.
work. So it's
No,
got to be
no.
worth it.
Yeah, so it doesn't, but it doesn't. I mean, I can tell you for a fact that I know it's worked for me. So basically, let's say you buy $1 million building, you can usually, and it's residential, you can write it off over 27 and a half years, which equates to about 3% a year, right? But if you do a cost segregation study, somebody can come in and say, well, you have $100,000 in equipment, and then you can write 100,000 off over 5 years. And you might even, can you do a section 179 on that 100,000 equipment? I don't.
Well, the 179 is going to apply specifically on different pieces of that equipment. That's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to accelerate it by each equipment, by
Yeah.
each piece.
Okay. And this is why, first off, guys, don't try to do your own taxes. Like you're all wealthy people don't do their own taxes. And that's because unfortunately it's pretty complicated. And to know all these tricks, you're either gonna miss out on a deduction and meet somebody like Will and say, oh my God. And if it wasn't too long ago, by the way, you can go back and amend your tax return. So I'm sure that, if you talk to somebody like Will, he can say, well, we can amend, change the last 2 years and get your money back. But you're just really doing yourself a disservice if you try to save some money and not get an accountant or somebody if you're a certain type of investor. Like who I'm sure you get this, like who makes sense to get a CPA and who doesn't make sense. You know what I mean?
Great question. I love that question. Um, you know, I'm going to go on a whim here and say that generally speaking, I'm a CPA, Jay, and I did not start to do my own taxes until I started my own CPA practice and started my tax practice. I wasn't even doing it. I mean, the first time I ever did my own taxes, I did it on the phone, and I was making like $12,000 in college, and I remember jumping around in my living room because they told me that I was going to get 800 bucks. And I was like, yes, I'm hanging out. I got a vacation, right? But after that, I never did them. I never thought that paying the two, three, four, five, $600 as a professional was worth me doing it on my own. At that time, you had a lot of deductions. I wanted the education. Like, what can I do in order to do this all legally?
Yep.
That's the whole thing. This is like peeling an onion. An individual wants to understand the education around it, and it's a lot, it's very noisy, the education that you get out there in regards to personal taxes as a small business owner, as a large business owner, as an investor. It's a lot of information. It's a huge body of knowledge. I would say that if you make anything, if you're a professional and you make anything over 50, 60, $70,000, it does not make sense to do your own taxes.
Right.
Because you may be able to do them. There are no write-offs, let's just say. It is what it is. It's math, right? But no one is going to tell you, hey, it's time to buy a home. Nobody's going to tell you, hey, you should probably invest in a Roth IRA for $7,000. This is a no-brainer. Nobody's going to tell you, hey, why aren't you inside of the 401k plan of your job? There's a match there. You're losing money. Nobody's going to tell you that. You're going to sit there and say, yeah, and you're going to pat yourself on the back, a little bit of dopamine. I did my own taxes. That's dopamine, man. That's dopamine. That's not necessarily the right, decision because you got no education other than your own. I love speaking to subject matter experts, especially now at my age, because I can figure out what they're doing, if they're doing things to benefit me, if they're doing things to benefit them. And my thing is learn how to read people and understand when a subject matter expert talks to you, make sure that the subject matter expert is talking for you, not for the benefit of him. And unfortunately, you run into that a lot of times, Jay. And a lot of times people decide, I'm going to do it my own. I'm tired of these guys.
Yep.
That's what ends up happening.
I will add, that just like you heard him talk about Section 179, they change the rules and the numbers and everything every year. So even if I cannot do my taxes, well, I wouldn't want to either at this point. I used to do thousands of taxes, but it's totally different than 20 years ago, it's not totally different, but it's different
Right.
every single year. And to stay up with it, like a CPA has to go and get continuing education and learn about the new. So, shout out to CPAs as long as
Thank you. Shout out to
yeah.
CPAs.
As long as the IRS has these crazy codes, you guys would be busy for a while. So, I want to talk about one other tax thing that I think is applicable. There's a million, but this is a very important one: 1031 exchanges. So, can you explain what
Yes.
1031 exchanges and how it helps real estate investors?
Yes. So when you have multifamily residence or real estate property that you have in operation and you want to go ahead and sell it, but you don't want to pay the taxes on it, you have a couple of choices, right? You can do a 1031 exchange. A 1031 exchange, you're going to have to hire an intermediary, right? An intermediary is going to go to your closing when you get rid of property of the exiting property. They're going to hold your dollars, right, until you identify the next property, right? There's a certain amount of time there that could only pass. I believe it's 180 days. Don't quote me, Jay, for you to identify and close on the next property. If you identify and close on the next property, when you go to the closing, the intermediary goes to the closing with you, releases the funds for you, and then you can buy the next property. And read between the lines within that area. You could use all of the proceeds, some of the proceeds, pay taxes on some of the proceeds, not pay taxes on all the proceeds, that sort of thing. So essentially, again, the IRS is not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it because they don't want to kill the profit cow. They want you to push it forward and keep operating, making money. They don't need to, they don't want to kill the deal. They've always been very cognizant of understanding that they don't want to kill deal flow. They don't
Right.
want to kill deal flow. But if you're going to kill the deal flow, taxpayer, then pay the tax. If you're going to keep that deal flow going for me, then I'll give you a break. That's kind of how they see it, right? So they
So
want people to invest, right? When you buy a property, what are you going to do? You're probably going to buy other things. You're probably going to get a mortgage. You're probably going to up the place. That helps them. That all helps them, right? But if you kill it there, hey, this is the end of the road. All right, pay. There's a toll here. Pay right here.
I never thought about it that way, but I just want to let me just clarify. So, you buy a property for $1 million and and you're selling it for 2 million. And let's say it's simple math, which is never simple math. Let's say you're have $1 million in profit. If you do this 1031, you will not pay tax on that $1 million in profit. Then it's deferred till later. You eventually will pay the tax. But think about it. Like, let's say your taxes, make a number up. Let's say it's 200,000 on that million. That's 200,000 you don't have to, roll into the next investment to buy another property. And so it's just like if you work as an employee and with 401ks and stuff like that, in your 401k, it grows tax free until later, and then you pay the tax. And they give you all these little charts that show you how much more it will grow, et cetera, et cetera. So 1031 exchange is a must. Now, I just want to mention, don't worry, you don't have to have some weird guy come with a bag of cash to your closing. Like, I've done plenty of 1031s. They don't physically take your cash and physically bring your cash. The way you explained it there, I had this idea, like some guy sitting next to me at the table. Matter of fact, I can't tell you the last time I physically went to a closing. I mean, years and years. Now, a lot of things are super cool. You can do them online. Um, okay, those were like some basic things on tax, and I don't want to bore people, but is there anything you think we should have mentioned,
No,
tax?
last thing is when you have something when you're going to have profit, just keep these three things in mind. A SEP plan, right? A SEP IRA plan, a solo 401k plan, or a simple plan. These are all tax beneficial instruments for your IRAs so that when you have profit, you can actually take money out of there, put it into these SEP simple solo 401ks. So you defer it in there further. It grows in there as well, tax free until you take it out again. So this is all if you're expecting profits out of any operation that you have. You should raise your hand and say, hey, what happens if I make a contribution to my SEP? to my solo 401k, or to my simple plan. Remember, all of these have different in nuances. If you have a small operation where it's just you and your spouse, most of these are very beneficial. If you have a sizable operation where you have employees, most of these involve your employees as well, and a possible contribution for them. You got to keep that in mind. But if you do have profit, keep in mind SEP Simple and 401k.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. So just so people know, if you're self-employed, um, you're not going to have a 401k at a job unless you have a bigger company, and you're going to have a 401k and you're going to match your employees. But there are retirement plans that you can have that are traditional retirement plan, not traditional, but you can still be in a 401k type asset and be self-employed. And I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people think, hey, I'm getting the real estate, I'm never going to have a retirement account, this, that, and the other thing. But that's not true. You can still have a retirement account. You can make your own. Again, we're going to put your information down here if you have some questions for Will. All right, let's get on to the tech startup stuff, which I don't know, you know, a lot of people don't know, but I was in my 20s the CFO of a small public company. And so I have some knowledge of this, but man, I've never invested in public companies, and I've never invested in startups. And when you and I had a conversation, I'll never forget. I think we were on the beach in Condado in Puerto Rico, and you were telling me about how people can raise monies and different, phase one or whatever you call these. So I don't know anything. So give us drop some knowledge on us on the tech startup world.
Amazing. And it's an asset class just like anything else, right? And believe it or not, all of these big tech companies, they did it the same way. If you go and check out Y Combinator is probably the biggest investor in what they call startups. They've invested in all of the big startups like Square, and don't quote me, but the PayPal. Peter Thiel is involved in that. That's where he ended up taking all his money, and he ended up creating Y Combinator. He actually really did something really nice for the startup world, really refining it as an asset class, putting the documents together, right? That all of these startup entrepreneurs like me can use in order to do things, so that way it's a little bit more uniform across the asset class. That gave a lot of strength to these asset classes. And what really helped is when original investors from Uber made 100, 200, 300, 4, 1,000x on their money, and along with these other unicorns. So it started to become a real thing. So now there's private equity. They go earn money, and they start looking for guys like me that are tech entrepreneurs, startup entrepreneurs, to see if they want to invest in me and my team, my idea, and anything that I have that could probably solve a problem for humanity. Let's go through the mechanics, though, right? Let's go through the mechanics. When you invest in a publicly traded company, right? The difference between that and investing in a private startup is the liquidity, Jay, right? You're on the open market. It's going to go up, it's going to go down based on transactions. If you want to get out, you can get out today, you can get out tomorrow. Why? Because it's a publicly traded entity. There's rules all the way around that. There's a big worldwide market in there. Somebody's going to buy what you have, you'll be able to sell it. It's going to create liquidity. But before those companies got there, they were a startup. They were either a family business, or they were a startup and said, hey, we're going to raise $2 million to create this company. And this is going to be round one. Friends and family is going to be the 250,000 round one. And round one is going to have a value cap, let's just say, of $1 million. Does anybody want to invest, right? It goes by rounds. When you start to raise this type of money, it goes by rounds. So let's just say I say, hey, friends and family, I need to raise $100,000. Right now, we're going to do a value cap here of $1 million. You just gave 10% of your business away. Generally speaking, right? It can get quite complicated when you start to talk about a safe agreement, or when you start to talk about dilution, when you start to talk about rounds that dilute people. But let's just keep it simple. You go out there and you say, hey, I'm going to give you a valuation of $1 million and I'm raising 100 grand. Generally speaking, 10% of your business is gone. Now, what happens when you sell that business? Here's where the monetization of everything comes. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the line, because generally each of these projects are 3 to 7 years, right? They sell it for 10 million. Let's just say no dilution. No dilution. Let's not get into there. They sell it for 10 million. You just made 10x on your money. Why? Because you bought it in at $1 million. They gave you X amount of shares at $1 million valuation. You ended up selling that company for $10 million, right? So now the $1 million business became a $10 million business. Your investment just became 10x, right? As simple as possible. Situations arise where valuations start, dilution starts to happen, right? You don't own the same amount of percentage that you did when you first started, but you do own the same amount of shares, right? You have to think about it more as shares and percentage. Because if Alex Rodriguez, for example, comes in and he invested in my new startup called Negozi, right? It's shameless plug, America's first social professional platform in Spanish, the Spanish version of LinkedIn, right? We may say, hey, we're taking $2 million from A-Rod Corp, right? Hey, the real estate doctor, hey, Jay, I know that when you came in, you owned 10% of this company and you gave me $100,000. It's now going to become 5%, right? Still have the same amount of shares, Jay, right? But we had to increase the amount of shares to bring in, A-Rod Corp. Hopefully I don't get sued for mentioning his name or somebody big. The reason we would do that is because our valuation is going to go really fast upwards because you just brought this amazing investor in. That's the only reason why Jay would say, "Oh, I'm good. You brought him in. I'm good. Let's go. I don't care that I used to own 10% and now I own 5%. We have a better chance at getting a $30 million valuation because he's here.
Right.
And if we get a $30 million valuation, I'm still making 3, 4, 10, 20, 30x on my money, regardless of my percentage that I had. You see?
So I have a question with that. So really, do I even let's say I invested at 10%. I was the first 10%. I gave 100,000 to the business. I really don't have it depends on your operating agreement and how it goes, but with 10%, even if I didn't want you to do it, I really don't have a say in whether you dilute me or not, right?
Good question. It depends on how you write it, right? At the end of the day, based on the amount, obviously, if you're a majority owner, right, of the stock, you're going to have a say, right? And if you have a seat on the board, right, you're going to have a say. Generally speaking, it goes out to proxy. And because you have a smaller percentage, you could vote. It may be a proxy, it may not. You could vote, but you're probably not going to win the vote, right? The people that are going to win the vote are the people that are majority of the shareholders and whatever the board says.
Okay.
So when you invest in this kind of asset class, right, Jay, you got to be looking at first and foremost, do you know what the heck you're buying? You know what I mean? You have to ask people that know about what the heck they're doing, like especially if you're buying tech. If you're buying tech, you have to be careful because they can say, "Oh, look at this! I'm building this AI thing, blah blah blah." What are they really doing? They created a front end interface and they connected to ChatGPT. Hey, I wouldn't have known that a year ago. I almost invested in a company that did that until I talked to a tech guy. He was like, "Will, this is just a front end, dude. Like, unless you have guys over there that you feel can operate a business outside of the tech, then you're investing in them and their marketing and executional expertise, right? I'll give you an example. Negozi is very low code. Negozi is very low code. We didn't create a social media platform. We didn't have to. Social media platforms are out there. But what we did say is that, dude, we have the technical expertise to create a massive Spanish language community here. We're going to leverage all of the tech here, but no one's going to grow this Spanish speaking tax insurance and real estate community more than us because we live it and we're speaking Spanish. And by the way, we're at 60,000 users now. They reach 2 million people. I don't care what tech you have. You aren't going to be able to do that without us. Right? So you got to kind of know what you're investing in. Are you investing in the tech because you feel no one else has that tech and they're going to be able to put that together and have a product market fit there that nobody has? Or you're investing in the team, right? Where you're going to get what they call founder market fit, right? Or you're investing in something in between.
Okay, I got a ton of questions. So,
Yes.
one of the negatives, and correct me if I'm wrong, to investing in this in any startup is that, like you started with the beginning, is it's not liquid. Like if I change my mind tomorrow and I want to sell, how do I get my money?
100%. It is absolutely restricted stock. You are not going to be able, generally speaking, to leverage that, or you may be able to leverage that if you find an alternative broker that knows what the heck it is, right? And you'd be able to borrow against it. That's not easy either. I'm not gonna sell that at all. But you're not going to be able to just dump it like you would dump a publicly traded company. What you're waiting for is an event.
Right.
And that event is supposed to happen within 3 to 7 years. Generally speaking, that's kind of the limbo out there.
So,
Number two, it's risky. It's risky. This is not GE you're buying. This is risky stuff. But the reward could be upwards 10x.
yeah. So, all right. So basically, when you invest in something like this, you should invest with money that you don't need anytime in the short term, and you're basically waiting for one of these events to get paid out totally. Or
Yeah, that's it.
you don't have to.
Generally speaking,
Yeah.
absolutely. Or you're waiting for the company to go public. The company could go public, right? Then all of a sudden your shares become liquid and you can go out there and sell them in the open market when they go public. Or you can sometimes the company arranges to do a buyout of some of the original shareholders and they'll buy it and you exit that way. But you either got to go public or somebody's going to buy you in an event has to happen, or you do a merger and you end up getting you could be bought, Jay, you can be bought by a publicly traded company already. And then the publicly traded company say, hey Jay, for the 100,000 shares that you have of Ngozi, I'm gonna give you 10,000 shares of GE.
Right.
And that could be your event.
Okay. Now, I think you made a point. I think I want to stick with this point. So when you're investing in, because we all have people, I coach people all the time and I get like, oh, my buddy came up with this idea and blah, and should I invest in it? And this, that, and the other thing. So you're basically investing in some type of technology or the group of people operating it. So how do you underwrite what you're going to invest in if it's you? Like if I say, hey, I got this startup, will you invest in it? How do you determine whether I get that you're going to want to learn about the team that's going to be running it. But I'm sure there's what are the financials to a startup? I mean, are you just
Good
investing?
question.
Yeah.
Super good question. So you're talking about valuation. How do you value what it is that your investment is? What's the value of what you're buying, so to speak? Generally speaking, Jay, a lot of these companies don't have revenue. We're Ngozi. I never went down that road to say, hey, I'm Ngozi. I have $0 I want to invest. I'm not going to play that game. I never wanted to play that game. I'm not that startup-y, so to speak. But let me tell you, 90% of the market is that way. Look, this is what I have. I'm building this. You want to get in early? We have zero revenue and zero customers right now. But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you what we think could happen within the next 3 to 5 years. And that's where you're going to be like, oh, wow. So you think in 3 to 5 years, you're going to be able to have X amount of sales, X amount of customers, X amount of value based on these metrics that you have. Right? This is what I'm saying. You have to know. Sometimes you're going in and right now, Ngozi, from day one, we had revenue. Right? We had revenue. But that doesn't mean that I can go ahead now and sell the story that, yeah, we have this revenue right now. We're going to build this a million things, and now we're going to have this crazy revenue. No. My approach to the startup game was very traditional, right? This is what we have. This is our product. This is where we're going to take our product. These are our sales. This is where I think we're going to take our sales within the next 3-4 years. My value is X on revenue. That's not what you're going to see, Norm. What you're going to see is a bunch of comparables like you do in real estate, right? Hey, I'm coming up with a better mousetrap for Uber. Uber is worth $100 billion. I'm coming up with a better mousetrap for for Beats headphones, right? And Beats went out at $1.8 billion, right? They start to do these comparables of what we're building, why it's better. They start to consider size of market, right? And they start to say, look, if we're able to build what we want to build, this is the market, this is where our competitors are. We think it could be worth this in X amount of time. And it goes by rounds, right? Friends and family round, they may say, hey, look, we're far away from what we're saying. So I'm going to give you I'm going to put a $2 million value on my business. Round two, they may have a product, but they haven't sold anything, right, Jay? They have a product, but they haven't sold anything. Oh, but we have a product. So now I'm going to go out at 10 million because we have a product and it works and it looks good, right? Now you're going to go into the seed. The seed is, hey, you have a product and you have some sales, right? Oh, okay. Then you have A, B, and C. So generally, the way I like to structure my stuff is friends and family, you may or may not have revenue, you may or may not have a product.
So crazy.
Right. Pre-seed, you may have a product, but you may not have customers. You may not have revenue, but you may have a product, right? At the end of the pre-seed, when you go start to seed, you got to start to say, hey, here's a seed money. Wow, they do have a product and they do have a little bit of an MVP. They have a couple customers. Stuff is going on there already because you already raised 2 rounds. So you should have some type of projection, some type of a momentum going. And look, this is all based on my experience. There's no, you know, people may disagree. I love it. Let's talk, right? And people may say, hey, Will, when you're in startup world and you're in the seed round, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have product or you have sales. 100% true. This is all very artistic, Jay.
Okay.
A lot of this is stories and art and risk, right? And the founder and the founding team and how far you are in the project that you have and in the product. So I'm talking very much generalizations here in the way I like to view the market and in the way that I have projected in my startups.
Okay. Everything leads to more questions. So can anybody invest in a startup?
Generally speaking, yes, you can invest on your own. You can invest through a C corp, through an S corp, through an LLC, through a trust. Yes, you can also, and if you're a foreigner, you could also invest. There's different reporting, and you have to understand also as a startup entrepreneur raising money, you have to understand the SEC rules on raising money. Right? There's all types
Well,
of
let's go back.
exclusions on
Let's
how
go
you
back.
do that.
Like let's say I'm I'm just out of college. I got $10,000 to my name. I can put $10,000 in a startup.
Yes.
Okay.
That
So
doesn't mean that a startup entrepreneur can actually go out there and solicit people
I
to
know.
raise money. There's all rules in that. But to the investor, absolutely, 100%. As long as you're 18 or years or older, or you have some type of exception on the contract rules, right? Yes,
Okay.
you can invest.
Okay. So the next question wasn't so much, but let you go there. So I start a startup. Can I just ask, what are my rules that, like you said, anybody can invest, but I have to do some stuff so that anybody can invest, right? I'm trying to say this as basic as possible.
So you're talking in the perspective of the investor, the buyer?
No, I started a company. It's J Startup. And
Yeah,
do I have to file something with the SEC? Do I have to put
good
out some
question.
legal documents, that kind of stuff?
Good question. So Y Combinator puts out a document called the SAFE, the Simple Agreement for Future Equity. This is generally speaking the document that everybody uses in order to raise money. The SEC has all of these exclusions, Reg D, Reg E, Reg C, all of these exclusions on, and the biggest one is generally speaking, you could raise up to X amount of dollars. Don't quote me. I believe it's 2 on Reg C. Don't quote me, but you can raise up to X amount of dollars on different exclusions. And the biggest exclusion is when you don't publicly go out there and solicit, and all of your buyers are accredited, which means they have a certain value of wealth. And there's documentation rules on that. I'm glad you asked me that. So before you raise a dollar, my suggestion is talk to a lawyer and understand what the choices are on you actually going out there and raising, and under what round and under what financial document, and for who, to who are you going to solicit to, because there are all a bunch of rules there they have to be careful with, and the SEC actually does monitor those rules. Generally speaking, there are some instances where when you raise money, you do have to file with the SEC.
Okay.
Right.
So, and I know all these rules change all the time. So
Right.
of course, I've been around the block. I've raised money. And in the version when I met with the lawyers, they said, well, this version, you should do this.
Right.
And all your investors have to be accredited, which at the time was like, I don't know, they had to have like a couple 100,000 in the bank and $1 million in net worth, not counting their
Right.
house, right?
That's
Something
right.
like that, right? So we're not going to get into the weeds of that, but you should definitely, if you're going to start a startup, you should definitely talk to a lawyer. You can't just, accept everybody's money unless you are a
Correct.
certain type of, you've done a certain type of compliance, I guess.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. But it just popped in my head. Like, what's the difference between a startup, like you're referring to, me just starting any old company, and I'll put a third piece, this like crowdfunding stuff I hear about all the
I
time.
love it. I love it. Good question. Good question.
Okay.
Okay, so remember, the startup is a style, Jay.
Style.
It's not a business formation choice. It's not an LLC or a C corp. Oh, I want to do it startup. No, no, no. Generally speaking, if you go the startup style, what you're saying is you're probably going to do a C corp. You're probably going to file it in Delaware, right? Because that's where there's a whole bunch of rules on why everybody does it in Delaware. Facebook did it in Delaware, and all of that stuff. And you're going to go down the road in the way that the startups do it, with the rounds of financing.
Okay.
That's startup. It has nothing to do with, oh, I'm going to do it as a C corp, as an S corp. Some people do it as LLCs as well. So, but really, it's a style, right? What you're mentioning, crowdfunding, is a choice to be able to measure the market.
Okay. So first off, is
There's
that
two types of
different style?
crowdfunding. Yeah, yeah. Oh, there's two types of crowdfunding. One is to measure market. I have a product. I want to see if you guys like it, support me, so that I can put out there that I put out a kick finder, or whatever they call it, for 20,000 units, and I ended up selling 30,000 units.
Okay.
Right? So you're kickstarting it, and the community's helping you because they're saying, hey, man, I'm going to buy that. That's cool. And I'm going to buy it at the price that he did in his Kickstarter. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is when you're actually raising money through a crowd, and they're actually getting shares or a safe agreement or something, investing in what you have. And all that really is an app or an aggregator or a brand like Kickstarter or something like that, that basically has the framework built in, so that all I have to do is send Jay a link. You see, some of them open it up to their investor network. Most of them do not. So what are you really using? You're really using their platform to be able to manage the fact that Jay is going to invest with me through my campaign.
Okay. And what's the pros, cons to doing it that way?
Yeah, generally speaking, there's costs associated with doing it through a crowd fund, right? Either an app cost or a percentage cost of everything that goes in. It all depends on a lot of the ways that you do it. The cons, that's the con. The pro is that they do help you structure the situation, make sure that it's 100% in line with the choice of SEC exclusion that you did, and the document is there, and they make it nice and easy for Jay to go in, you know what I mean, and get it all done in a compliant way and move forward.
Okay. All right. And since you were talking about style, so startup is a style. Do you need to like wear t-shirts and have headphones like that to be a startup? I'm just messing.
When I say style, I don't mean that. I
I
mean,
know. I was
yeah,
messing.
I mean the
All right.
rounds of funding. I mean, all of the investors understand that it's going to be an exit. That's how they're going to make money, or an event. Everybody knows that it's restricted stock. Everybody knows that you may or may not have revenue. You may or may not have product now. Like it's that whole world. Everybody knows that it's a scrappy kind of thing. Everybody kind of knows that if you work for a startup, you're probably not going to get paid what you're worth, but you're probably going to get a little bit of stock,
Yep.
right? It's all trying to get to the top of this mountain so you're able to find that event. That's the
Right.
startup style.
It's all about an event. And look, what I've learned over the years, there's different. Actually, I may have formed this thought, made it concrete after talking to you that traditionally through my life, I'm an entrepreneur and I'll start a company and I look at a company and go, okay, I'm going to have this company so I can work in this company, I can generate money, and it makes this much money. But people in New York and Wall Street, they look at like, okay, let's start this company so that we can sell this company. They're not looking at it like, hey, I want to make it. They solely started day one for day whatever, seven. Is that
100%.
yeah?
They don't want to operate. They don't need to. That's they're not looking to operate. They're looking for hyper growth.
Yep. Yep.
Hyper
So
growth.
I think that's a big distinction for a lot of people that are entrepreneurs. When you're thinking about this, this is not for, I mean, I guess you could do it, but I mean, you have to change your whole frame of looking at it as a business as an asset, like you're talking about it, as opposed to a vehicle that you work in and make money. Okay. Just a couple other questions, and we can wrap. Well, I want to talk about living somewhere else and maybe a little crypto. So,
Sure.
I'm sure somebody's watching this. They're going, "Oh my God, I want to start a startup and I want to raise money. I want to get somebody to give money for my dream." So, where do you find the money?
Friends and family first.
Okay.
Friends and family first. And that's the way I did it. And I explained it to them. I did it at an age when they knew that I was, they knew me enough. I was in the circles enough. They're like, oh, wow, Will has this thing. It's not his first go round, right? I didn't raise any money for Tax Terminal, by the way. TaxTerminal.com. I didn't raise any money. I did it all. Well, I raised my dad gave me some money, but
Hey, that counts.
um,
Give them a
and
shout.
I had one convertible investor for TaxTerminal.com that we ended up converting it, and it was more like a structured agreement where I told him, you know what, I don't know where this thing is going. Very candidly, I want to make sure you get your return on investment. Let's restructure this into some type of an annuity. Because to be perfectly honest with you, I didn't have enough information then on what the heck I was doing and how I was going to exit and all of that whole startup world. I ended up getting all my information there during the pandemic when I took a contract with my other social platform called Infinite Reality, and I was the worldwide controller there, and I was behind every transaction, Jay. That was my training.
Wow.
And that was my second startup. My first startup was taxterminal.com. It's still there. I keep that, right? It's still my platform. I love it. It's a regular operating business. It's not a startup style business anymore. So how do you start? You just talk, you let people know kind of what information you have, what product you have, how you plan on scaling it, why you think it could do well. And you have to go to the Y Combinator site and take all their trainings.
Y Combinator. So you said Y Combinator and safe. These are two things that I
Right.
picked out of this. All right. Well, listen, somebody might have listened to this and not even understood it. I don't expect that they would understand it 100%. I don't even understand it 100%, but it's enough to wet your whistle to get you
Right.
excited to go, hey, let's talk to Will, or look at this Y Combinator, et cetera, et cetera. So let's talk just in general. What do you think about crypto and that space? And
I think crypto has had varying stories in its lifetime.
mhm.
And I don't know where that story is going to go. And I know that the story is not going to end, right? I know that it started as barter and then it became something that started like something in between an asset and a treasury. And then now it's kind of something more that looks more like an asset than a treasury. And now you're starting to be able to leverage it. Now you're starting, it's a real asset class. Now you've got other things. Now you've got base, which is, you know, what a lot of people are investing in, kind of the base of it, which is like the Ethereum piece of it. And it's not, once it gets adopted like that, all things considered, it's clear that it's not going to go anywhere. But it's also clear to me personally, my opinion is the story hasn't ended there. The
All right.
use, the way it's used and the way it's going to be monetized and all of that, it hasn't ended.
Well,
And
I, I,
it's going to
I
be very interesting to see.
I'm a big, when I say crypto guy, I've now kind of morphed to like mostly Bitcoin guy. And I got into Bitcoin, maybe luckily in 2014 because I like the idea of no banks and you could transfer money, which now is not even what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is more like a store of value. So I didn't see that coming. Ethereum, like you're right, is like the base that everything is built on. And then there's 98% of a bunch of crap. But that being said, um, they're starting to put um, they're starting to put properties on the blockchain. So like deeds to properties and all this other stuff they're going to put in the blockchain. I mean, I could probably do a podcast all about like the things that they're going to do. You can borrow, like you could have, an account in crypto and you can borrow against it and you can lend on it. I mean, so there's a lot of things that you can do. And I probably should do a little, not that I'm an expert, I'm enough to be dangerous. I really do believe in it. And I still think now 96% of the general public doesn't understand it and they just say it's some digital thing that isn't real. But I'm happy that they haven't figured it out yet because as you can see, when they figure it out, I'm a big believer Bitcoin's $1 million by 2030 for one Bitcoin. But anyway,
Mm,
all right.
I
uh
like it. I like it. I like it. I like it.
I've
Okay.
been saying that for like 3 or 4 years.
I like that.
Actually, one of my first posts on my Instagram was when it went down to 15,000 after there was like somebody that ripped off. I don't know if it was crypto.com or it was the guy. I even got ripped off like in London. I forget what the name of that company was. Anyway, and it went down to $15,000. One of my first posts was like, everybody, you should buy as much as you can, blah, 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 blah,
Right.
blah. Here we are
Right.
at $100,000. Anyway,
Right.
let me just finish this with like, you're in Colombia, I'm in Aruba, you know, I think a lot of Americans, and especially now, like, listen, you can work from anywhere. You got wildfires in California, and I think a lot of people are never going to go back to that part of, you're not going to go back to Malibu and be in a construction site and this, that, and the other thing. Like, what's your thoughts on like living remotely? I mean, you told me before we got on the pod that you're in Colombia for a couple months. I
Yeah.
love Colombia is very close to Aruba. If people aren't good with geography, we go there all the time. And let me preface this. I did one post on my Instagram about how it's cheaper for me to live in Aruba and than the United States. And a lot of people just are like, what are you out of your mind? That I've been to Aruba. I stayed at the Ritz-Carlton. Well, yeah, I'm not staying at the Ritz-Carlton. You know what I mean? So the housing's cheaper. But when I go to Colombia from Aruba, it's like 25% of the price I mean, one of my favorite follows, I would love to give him a shout out, but I don't have the name, is a real estate agent in Medellin, if you're from
Mm.
there. And they show me like here, they show like here's a $425,000 house in Medellin. And it's ridiculous. It's 10,000 square feet and beautiful and blah, 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 blah. And it's in a better environment anyway. So I'm a big believer in like living. I think it's very important too that you got to enjoy where you live. You have to, if you're going to work hard or create or whatever, you want to feel good about yourself, and where you live is important. So that's my rant about it. Why are you in Colombia and what's your feelings on it?
Well, so my platform, Nagozi, is Spanish language. So I was looking for a back office of where I would be able to house a lot of my back office operations, my marketing, my membership services, and all of those things. And I was like, for years, I had a couple people working with me in India. Um, and there was a language barrier there that only I had the patience to deal with, right?
Uh-huh.
My customers were not going to have the patience to be dealing with that, to be perfectly honest with you. So I was like, where are we going to have this back office? Back offices are what we have to do. it was nice to be able to pick a country that there was no language barrier. All of my members, everybody on Ngozi is Spanish, so there was no language barrier there. So it was easy for me to understand. The city that I picked, you have Bogota, you have Medellin, you have
Cali,
Pereira, which is a
yeah,
smaller city,
Cartagena, yeah.
and you have Cali. You know, those are basically the major cities. I didn't go to the major cities. I'm in a very small city next to Pereira, which basically houses the best universities of the country.
Hmm.
A little bit different here than Cali. I was in Cali this weekend, but it's a little bit different here. The environment is a little bit different. It's kind of like San Francisco, the weather. Maybe a little warmer. It's very mountainous. But at the end of the day, my investment here are the people and the resources that I could get for value.
Mhm.
And it works for me because I can communicate with them very well in Spanish language. Now, there are English speakers here as well. The other piece is proximity, right? I haven't gone to India yet. I never went to India to go check on that stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Colombia, I can come in here and have a good time, right? And not that you're not going to have a good time in India, but this is a good time. The weather is good. It's not that far from Miami. You're looking at 4 hours, right? Four and a
Yep.
half hours, 5 hours. It's less, basically comparable to a flight to California from the East Coast. So, proximity, economics, and language barrier are the things that I was looking at. And I chose Colombia over Portugal, over Spain, over the Dominican Republic because of um, the climate. I don't know if you know the climate and their population and what's been happening in the last 3 years in Colombia. I'm not sure you know, Colombia is now the second most populated state in the world. The Latin, the second most populated Spanish country in the world is now Colombia at almost 60 million people, right behind Mexico. So
Hmm.
now there's more people here than in Spain. There's more people here than Argentina. There's more people here than in Portugal.
I mean, listen, I'm a big fan of it, but you brought up a couple of things I think are important. Time zone for me is important. That's why I'm in Aruba. It's same time zone half the year, and it's 1 hour different. Like even going to the West Coast of the United States is difficult for me. Um, you know, you I don't Americans don't understand this in general. So I don't even know what the situation is. So I presume that I don't know that you bought a place you're going to be there for, but like you're renting a place, right? Is it
Yeah.
Airbnb or you have a normal rent?
So I give you an example. Good question. A good hotel, a good hotel, right? In either of these places, in my little small city, is going to be $50. In some of the bigger major cities, is going to be 60, $70 a
Yeah.
night. A good hotel. A good Airbnb, even where I'm at right now, which I have a really kind of a hotel style Airbnb, breakfast, all that stuff. $80.
Yeah. It's insane.
It's
It's
hard. It's hard. Again, it's all about lifestyle and all of that. I could be anywhere in the world. I'm single, Jay. I don't, you know what I mean? I could go here, there, the other round. Not forever, but right now, when it's a no brainer for me.
when you say
And
it's
it's nice.
hard, what's hard?
Um, it could be harder for other people that all have other commitments.
Like families.
Right. Of
Yeah.
course. I mean,
Yeah.
this is not a decision that you solely make on economics, right? You got to think economics, you got to think political, you got to think interpersonal, you got to think social. For me, it all worked out. And most of it worked out was because I'm a single guy. I don't have any strings. I
Yep.
don't have any commitments like that. So it worked. But it made me feel comfortable in at least that, I'm not gonna be here forever, even though as a single guy, I'm not gonna be here forever. But
Yep.
but I discovered it, right? And I can I'm an American. I'm an American Dominican. I love the US. Everything about the US, I really do. The weather, you could find it wherever you need. You're very well protected with the laws. It's a capitalistic world. Um, you know, they have their social justice generally in every major city. That's a big deal. I feel fair. I feel fair. But it's nice to be able to say, hey, I could spend time in these other countries.
Uh-huh.
I don't have to live in these other countries, but I
Yep.
could spend a significant amount of time in these other countries.
Okay. So I'm the opposite. I have a family and kids. And there are schools like my kids go to American school here that teaches in English. They get to learn both my kids speak 4 languages now living here. They would never learn that in the US. I also love the US. Like I love capitalism. I mean, look, the US has pros and cons, but I love both about the US. I love making money in the US is best place is when you live in other countries, you realize how well set up the United States is. Like in Aruba, to start a company, you decide, I want to start a company, incorporate it. 8 months. 8 months. No joke. And you can't start one without having a Peruvian partner. So the US, you could be from Colombia and start a company in the United States in a day. It's insane. So, yeah, United States, great. My point is like, it's nice to make United States money and live in these other countries where it doesn't cost as much and you get a better, lifestyle. Your money goes way further,
Yeah.
and you can live like a billionaire, maybe not a billionaire, but you can live like a 10 millionaire, on $100,000 a year of income. Like, you really live in large in Colombia.
And
So
safety is always a thing. I'm glad I didn't do this in my 20s and 30s, Jay, because I was loud in my 20s and 30s, man. I'm Latino. I'm from the Dominican Republic, man. When I walked somewhere, I wanted people, I wanted attention. Other cities in Colombia are more dangerous, here and there. I don't go to where the danger is. I don't need to go to where the danger is. I don't bring attention to myself anywhere I go. I try to just chill. And I
yep.
try to keep in my mind, why would anybody want to mess with me?
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm just sitting here, I'm just here working, right, as a working guy. And I try to live a low profile life here, right? I do for safety.
No, well,
But
yeah, I want to just add that there are obviously dangerous parts of Colombia, but there's dangerous parts of Philadelphia and New York too.
of
You know,
course,
so
of course.
some people have this perception, like I forget now even the guy's name, like they have the guy who was the guy 30 years ago that it was like the drug lord. He's real famous.
Oh, Pablo Escobar?
Yeah, probably like they think Pablo Escobar is running around. Now, listen, Venezuela is totally different. I'm not going there. I get killed as soon as I land,
Right.
But Colombia, I'm totally cool with. And you're right though. You're not going to roll around with a Rolex and and a this and a that. You're not going to do that. But it's a different lifestyle. Okay. So, all right, I wanted to get some of your viewpoints. So, listen, this was a awesome pod because we went over a lot of different subjects and it just shows the range of brilliance you have. It's why, I was attracted to listening to you. The first time I met you, I was like
Thank
following.
you.
You're welcome, man.
I
So
appreciate you too, man. I appreciate your insights in real estate. I want to have you on my podcast soon.
ha-
Um, but you have to talk in English, and then we'll chat GPT or we'll AI it in Spanish.
that's fine.
And no, man, I appreciate you, Jay. I love your story. I met your family, and it's all good, man. Big up to the real estate doctor, subject matter expert, creator that you are. You're not an influencer. Subject matter expert, creator that you are.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. So, Will, thank you for being on the pod, and everybody have the best day of your life. Thanks, guys.